Hi there, it's me, a guy you probably don't know. I'm here to tell you that I've been making a game for the last however long, and after countless hours of work, it's nowhere near done. But I still feel like talking about it. If you have a problem with that, then maybe don't, and listen to my story anyway. I've been calling the game Momentos. Sometimes I add Lost to Time, or Figments of Time, to the end because they sound cool. But I haven't decided on a final name yet. You seem smart though, so I bet you can guess the game has something to do with time and memories. And you'd be right. Watch to the end of the video and I'll give you a prize for being so smart. Before we get started, I know that most people who watch these kind of videos are also game devs. So if that's you, have fun laughing at how bad I am at this. But for those of you who don't do game dev, let me start by explaining why I care so much about this. For me, game dev is the ultimate creative pursuit. I've had a lot of creative ambitions in life, from drawing and painting to making videos and writing books. But game dev combines all of those things and more into a single hobby. For someone like me who gets a new idea once every 6 months, it makes me feel like I'm not spread so thin. Anyway, today is February 13th, 2026, and that means it's been 25 days since, It's been exactly 1 year since, hold on, it's been 1, 2, 3, carry the 5, you know what, let's just rewind. Hello, camera. Today is February 13th, 2025, and it is day 1 of, hold on. This still isn't the beginning. We need to go all the way back. Okay, so we're like a decade back now, but don't worry, I'm not trying to tell you my whole life story. I just want to make a brief pit stop here in 2015 to say this is where I actually started making games. A friend introduced me to RPG Maker, and even though I didn't want to make a JRPG, which is what that program is used for, I had so much fun playing with it that here I am 11 years later, still trying to make games. I bring up these days with RPG Maker because ever since I stopped using it, I've been chasing a high that came with being able to just create without limits. You see, RPG Maker does a lot of the heavy lifting. It offers you a combat system, a party system, menu systems that let you pause, save, load, talk to NPCs, buy from stores, manage your inventory, and more. It gives you all sorts of assets to make your world with, and it even helps you make new ones. In a lot of ways, I never felt like I was making a game, just that I was playing around, letting my imagination wander, seeing what the results could be. And ever since then, I've been stuck learning how to make those underlying systems, slowly crawling my way back to a place where things just work. You see, I gave up RPG Maker because I asked myself, if I'm going to make a game, what kind of game would I actually make? There's only 1 or 2 games I ever really loved, so let's be honest here. If I was ever going to make my own game, I wanted it to be like... My relationship with video games is kind of one note. I play games with friends and I play Zelda games, and that's it. There's something about the combination of exploration, progression, and solving puzzles that really scratches the itch for my brain like nothing else. So of course I wanted to make my own Zelda game. I wanted to come up with a world to explore, items to progress your exploration, and puzzles to solve with those items. I just didn't have any ideas for any of that. Let's skip some of the boring stuff and fast forward to 2021. I'd long since outgrown RPG Maker and was using a different engine called Game Maker. Very different. Game Maker is really good for top-down 2D games. I had my bi-yearly idea for a character and thought it would be funny if he ran around in a shirt that was too big. His little sleeves flopped around as he moved. So I drew the character and put him in Game Maker. But that was the end of that. In those days, most of what I did in Game Maker was prove to myself that I could if I wanted to. I had proven that I could draw the character. I'd proven that I could set him up and move him around with a controller, and then I was satisfied. Making it any good would be really hard. But if I wanted to, I could do it. I just didn't want to. It's definitely not that I couldn't. So I don't know why you're looking at me like that. And it's not that I didn't have any good ideas either, or that what I had made wasn't as good as what I imagined it would be. I just didn't want to, okay? In January of 2022, I was doing a writing exercise with a friend. I was depressed and dealing with a ton of brain fog, so I wasn't having any really useful ideas. But I did have this one image of a guy floating in space. A rusty old barge comes along and picks him up. The man floating in space has no idea who he is, but the captain of the barge offers to take him to a photo booth at the center of space. This photo booth is special. When it takes your picture, it mingles with the immutable truth of the universe to determine exactly who you are. It's a stupid idea, right? Not worth a second thought. But a year later, I was still thinking about it. February of 2023, I had once again had my bi-yearly new idea. What if, in Ocarina of Time, my favorite Zelda game, you could traverse time anywhere in the world by placing down the Master Sword? I was just going to prove that I could make it look like the character went back in time in GameMaker. It was never supposed to be more than that. But here I am exactly 3 years later making a devlog, so When I opened GameMaker that day, I continued using the little guy who made me chuckle, tee-hee, him shirt too big. And since I was thinking about the photo booth idea, I decided to merge everything together. And suddenly I had the start of something that I could see being a full game. You start as a guy trying to get his memory back. The goal of the game is to find special tokens that operate the photo booth, unlock the secrets of your past, and find yourself. You can do that by going back in time to when you were a kid, and then your little sleeves will flop around, because I already had sprites for that. Cool. I wasn't going to have any better ideas, so I started working. This was it. This was the moment, 8 years after I started making games as a side project, when I finally took it with some measure of sincerity. And it went about as expected. Okay, so I spent pretty much all of 2023 just trying to make the character push a box. I was a long way from the creative freedom I had when playing with RPG Maker. I'd gone from being able to build the world and have things just fall into place like playing with Legos, to this nightmare world of code that doesn't do what you expect. The next year was a lot smoother though. I created parts of the world and decided on all of the different items that I wanted the player to use to solve puzzles. I decided that switching between the grown and child player would have some consequences. When you're grown, you can attack with your weapon, but to become young, you have to put your weapon down. Then you can use toys and imagination to solve puzzles. The toys you can use when you're young were pretty standard at first. A toy gun to shoot enemies and make you not totally defenseless, some firecrackers to blow up rocks, marbles to scatter on the floor and stun your enemies. But the one I was and am most proud of is the cloner tool. There's never been a Zelda game that focused around the gimmick of being able to clone the things in the world. I'd had an original idea for once, one that felt worthy of being in a real Zelda game. Maybe one day Nintendo will catch up to my level of genius, but I wouldn't hold my breath or anything. It was also around this time that I decided my game would play like a randomizer. For those of you who don't know, there's a whole community of people who play the Legend of Zelda games with all of the items shuffled around. So it's a new experience every time you play. I love playing the Zelda randomizers almost as much as I love playing the games normally. But since the randomization is added after the fact, the story never makes sense. So what if the game was built from the ground up with that in mind? And so the main idea for Momentos was born. The items that you're collecting are all things you used to own as a kid, but you left behind in random places. Small mementos of your past. You're trapped in a strange world that's a decayed ruin of your imagination land. Or whatever. It's a happy place you used to go when you were younger, but you haven't visited in a long time. Remembering who you are will require you to remember the world around you. So finding a memento of your past restores the world to the state it was supposed to be in, while sometimes giving you a new tool to traverse new areas and solve new puzzles. By the end of 2024, I had almost all the systems I needed to finally start making the game. I even got to the point where I was making puzzles. Finally. But my code was such a mess that changing and adding things was more likely to break the whole project than not. I decided to start fresh. And that finally brings us back to 1 year ago today.
Hello, camera. Today is February 13th, 2025, and it is day 1 of my challenge to work 100 days on my game.
I made it my goal last year to spend at least 100 days doing something with my game, either art or planning or coding. I wanted so badly to make it to the end of the year and say, I did it. But if that were the case, this video would have come out back at Christmas, and it would have had a different title. I still want to talk about all the work I did though, because it's where most of my progress lies. Within the first few days of the challenge, I had rediscovered my mortal enemy, pushing boxes around. This time, I chose to move on. 2 weeks in, I had some of the player's tools working. Throwing bombs worked, but it had some visual bugs, so I moved on. I figured out how to make the player scatter marbles on the ground to stun enemies. So naturally, I started making enemies to test them on. Here I am combining the two so you can freeze this little frog thing and then blow him up. The next item was supposed to be a special set of glasses you can wear as a kid and see the world in the future. I'm not sure I'll ever use this one. It was a challenge to get the tile map to swap out, and even after all that, it doesn't look that great. I added a rocket launcher. Here's some footage of me absolutely wrecking a bunch of those frog things. I started making it so you could use a flashlight in dark rooms, but I never got around to making any puzzles with that mechanic. 32 days in, I was messing with the player controller to make it so they could swim, and it had a little floaty motion, so it wasn't just normal walking around in the water. But I never did finish the animations. The cloner tool made its return on day 35. This time I was limiting the placement to a grid, and it wasn't long after that I was back to where I left off in 2024, making my first puzzles using the tools I had created so far. Here's the first room. You need to pick up the cloner tool, clone the pillar, then place it on the switch to open the door. Just checking if I can move boxes yet. Nope. Still no? Okay, that's fine. I set up a bunch of puzzles that had you placing clones on moving rails. So I also made a mini boss that slides on the rails. You drop a clone on the rail to hit him, he shows his weak spot, and blam, you murder him with whatever tool does damage. Here's some of the other rooms with puzzles. Here's one where you have to clone something to block a laser beam. One where you have to use the rails to get the clone over the water. Here you have to clone a clone to get past a moving laser. About 50 days in, I had found the freedom to create new ideas and rapidly prototype rooms. This is when I started making it so you could switch states between young and grown-up. Not sure what's going on with the sprite there. Then I was playing a Zelda randomizer for Wind Waker, and I really liked how you could pick up the enemy's weapons. So I decided to make it so the small, swordless player could grab enemy weapons to defend themselves. That meant new enemy AI that used weapons that the player could steal. They had to have logic for using the weapon, going after the weapon if they dropped it, and more. Thus was born the Squirrel Man, wielding a stick. The player could make them drop it.
This stick, that murders them instantly.
Or maybe they could just take it off the corpse. The marbles made a comeback appearance to force them to drop their weapon. Then, I finally saw what it would be like to place down a perfectly good sword, only to have a bunch of enemies swarm you and have to take one of their weapons to survive. Here I am doing some UI stuff to change the screen resolution, and this is my first test of the save system.
I have a good feeling about this. Oh my god, it almost got there!
Here's the arcade that will house the photo booth someday. A lot of the assets are old, from 2024. Around day 60, I started working on cutscenes, so I left all the puzzles I made behind and began to prototype the beginning of the game and the tutorial. That's the footage you saw at the beginning of the video. For the next 25 days, I worked chronologically through the game. I added a few more enemies, some new abilities, and finally, it felt like I was playing around, letting my imagination wander, playing with Legos instead of fighting with code. But that was as far as I went. 85 days into the challenge, with 3 months left in the year, I just threw in the towel. I don't know why, I just couldn't do it. Sorry if that doesn't make for a very exciting story. I was just feeling the weight of what I'd built again. And when I took a break on day 85, I just didn't want to pick it back up. As 2025 drew to a close, I started exploring other game engines. Specifically, I was curious if I would ever be able to make a 3D game. I was back to that prove to myself I can mentality from 2021. But this time, the answer was no. I couldn't do 3D game dev. But I could use a tool capable of 3D. Godot is an open source game engine that has a simple design, easy to understand coding language, and a lot of tools that GameMaker doesn't. So, even though I had been using GameMaker for the last 10 years, and it was the only exposure I had to coding, seriously, I don't know any other coding languages, I gave Godot a try. I made this little elf game with some assets that I bought way back when, and once I was satisfied with my ability to use Godot, I started over. It is, January 20th, 2026, and I'm starting over. 7 days later, I had brought back the toy gun, the rocket launcher, and the cloner tool. I can shoot that. Oh no, those just stop. I didn't know that. I never really tested. The latter of which I spent way too much time perfecting. This third incarnation lets you cycle between what you're selecting, move what you're about to place down, and it's just all around less clunky. 10 days in, I had an inventory menu set up so you could actually pick up and use the different tools. Once I had a health system in place, it was just a matter of rearranging some things to build a little test room. I thought this was kind of fun. You have to use the cloner tool to pick up a box, break the clone, and then get a bazooka out of it to get the key. After that, I got stuck in a loop of trying to make the game save for like a week. I don't really have much to show off of the save system, but I did start working on a new introduction to the game. I wanted the opening to be a little more surreal and have a little more character going on. So instead of waking up, saying "where am I?" and then being told to follow this guy to the photo booth, you wake up strangled by this rose that's keeping you rooted to reality. And the player has to slowly figure out that they're not in the real world anymore. And that brings us to the end of the first 25 days, and the end of this video. I did tell you that I would have a prize for you if you watched all the way to the end. I think it's down there underneath of the subscribe button. If you just click on it, it should show you the prize. Go ahead and try. Wait, what? It just subbed you to the channel instead of giving you the prize? That's probably a bug. I'll make sure to fix it in my 50-day check-in. You might as well stay subscribed so that you don't miss it.